Bethesda just revealed the first DLC to be added to Starfield. At the time recording this video, we are still 2.5 months away from the official release. But that doesn't stop Bethesda teasing what's going to happen within the future. And in today's video, we're going to be going through absolutely everything that you need to know. So firstly, we do actually need to talk about Starfield itself before we start talking about any DLC. The story itself is very much a closely guarded secret, but with that said, we know a few key details. We know that Starfield takes place in 2330, around 20 years after two of the largest factions in the settled systems, the United Colonies and Freestar Collective, engaged in a bloody colony war. Your character will assume the role of a member of Constellation, which is an organization of space explorers trying to navigate what remains of the aftermath. We also know roughly how this story begins. Your character interacts with these artifacts, and something happens to knock you unconscious. That is where you're woken up by these two characters, and you go into the character creation setting. And that's when you actually get to customize your character. It's likely at this point you'll go into a city called New Atlantis. And the reason that we say that is because the Constellation faction has a headquarter in New Atlantis. It's likely at that point you walk in, and it's at that point in which these artifacts start to levitate. Now, this is what we're trying to piece together. This is pretty much everything that we know about the story so far. And it's unlikely for there to be any more details to be revealed until a week or two before the release, and ultimately the release of Starfield. What we have been told is that the main storyline itself will take anywhere between 30 to 40 hours to complete, but it should be highlighted that it's unlikely that you'll complete it in that time. Yes, if you were to go through every single mission and just focus on the main missions themselves, nothing else, no exploration, no side quests, no dynamic events, nothing, yes, you'll be able to go and complete that, but it's also likely that you will go and do some of the other activities. In fact, it's recommended. And we also can't ignore the high replayability options, with there being loads of different backgrounds, loads of different traits, and loads of other stories that you're able to go and see, whether that be through side quests or picking different dialogue options the second, third, fourth, fifth time around, or even doing the exact same thing and selecting different options when going through the main story. But once all of that is finally complete, that is where the first DLC comes into play. Now, this has already been revealed because if you go through the pre-order of the Constellation Edition, it does say that you'll get access to an upcoming DLC called Shattered Space, which has been described as the first story expansion for the game. Now, as we don't know anything about the story other than what we've gone through in this video, which more or less can be said within a minute or two, it does mean that we also definitely do not know what's going to happen within Shattered Space, but really, most players see it coming down to one of two options. Firstly, as this is an RPG, and with this there are loads of different options as you're going through the main story itself, and it's likely that there's going to be many different endings, well, this Shattered Space DLC could be tying up any of those loose ends. Branching dialogue is awesome in that you can have multiple ways in which you can go through the exact same thing, which does add replayability, but it also means that there may be some loose ends within the story. Certain characters doing things that never really get answered for. And if that's the case with Starfield, Shattered Space would definitely close those off. The second option is that this in itself is going to be a standalone story, completely separate from the main story itself of Starfield, bringing in new characters and going off on a completely new adventure. What's really interesting with all of this is that it's not going to be the last. There will be loads of expansions. Bethesda plan to keep on building upon this for years to come. Todd Howard had an interview with IGN, and during that interview, he said that he wants to expand the story. He sees no reason not to expand the story because the fans love it, as well as developers love designing it. But alongside this, it's not just about story expansions. Players can expect regular updates in terms of premium skins that you're able to buy into, likely various ships as well as ship components, and it's likely that there will be extra customization options in terms of outposts and even weapons. What's really interesting about all of this though, and this really comes down to speculation, but many players believe that we could even get planets themselves as DLC. Reason for this is because most planets within the game are procedurally generated. They have their own rule sets, there are some buildings as well as some key areas which are handcrafted, but other than that, each planet reacts the exact same way, in that from a distance it's actually nothing. But once you get close enough, this tile slowly expands, procedurally generating a full planet with the rule set which is already in place, building out resources, wildlife, and also including some of those various components which are handcrafted in itself. This means if there was a new premium DLC in terms of there being a new story and they wanted to set it into a completely new location, they could do so, all with a tile, which is pretty amazing to think about. But no matter what type of content Bethesda looks to release within the future, we also can't ignore what players themselves will be able to create. It has been revealed that modding will fully be supported. Bethesda will be supporting the modding community, whether that is to create a small mod which just makes certain parts easier, or whether or not people are gonna go and recreate completely different cities. And on that note, we do need to talk about something in particular. This is the city of New Atlantis. Now, New Atlantis was already mentioned within this video. We talked about it right at the beginning. This is the headquarters for the Constellation, and it's likely your journey will begin here within the first hour or so of gameplay. And it's likely that you would want to come back to this location because it is the biggest city in the game, and not just that, it's the biggest city Bethesda have ever built. It's likely that there's more content here than anywhere else. That in itself is going to make this exact location incredibly popular. But it wouldn't surprise me if those which are looking to create mods take things from this location, take things from New Atlantis, changing them to be something completely different, rebuilding a city so that is something very similar to what we've seen in other games. Maybe they take inspiration from the likes of Cyberpunk 2077's Night City and they try to bring that over to New Atlantis, or maybe they'd go on something on a much smaller scale to place various signs which link to some of Bethesda's previous titles. Regardless how small or how big it is, Bethesda will be supporting the modding community, and that in itself opens up new options in terms of gameplay. And I reckon New Atlantis will be probably the center for a lot of things, especially when it comes down to customization in itself. I know it's incredibly early to be talking about DLCs, but with everything that has been revealed so far about Starfield, is there anything that you think it's missing? I know that is a big ask. I'm sure there's loads of people out there that would love to go and see 60 FPS for this game, as it is currently locked at 30 FPS. Just something where you can turn down the graphics settings and increase performance. Myself, I'm definitely someone looking forward to exploration, so after I manage to go through all 1000 planets, which is probably going to take me about 500 hours, maybe even more. But once that is done, I would definitely love to go and see some extra planets be added, maybe even some unique locations. Maybe some massive spaceships that you can come across, either as dynamic events or set locations that you can actually visit and explore. But whether it's any of those examples or you have something completely different, let us know in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this video, then I highly recommend that you subscribe. We are going through Starfield content every single week, building up to the release, and you do not want to miss a thing. If you want to learn a bit more, then I highly recommend clicking the video on screen right now. YouTube tracks everything that you watch and knows exactly what you enjoy, and that's why they recommended this video specifically just for you. I hope you enjoy.